Welcome to the Public Voice Salon. We are an open dialogue on education, the arts, and social change. We are also trying to start a conversation that may change the world. That's what we like. We like conversations that could change the world. And we are with a wonderful man, Dr. Gil Horowitz, who is an amazing activist, psychologist, and just a man about town. He's a person who you bump into in the park. He's always very active. He's a very interesting person. You're going to get to know him here in our dialogue together. And it is such a delight. We've been trying to get Gil on our show for a while, and we finally captured him here in the library at 2 Fifth Avenue, which is a famous building built in 1958. Ed Koch used to live here.
51, by the way.
51. I thought.
Historian for the building. Construction started in 49, and the first resident lived here Thanksgiving weekend of 51. But for the most part, 52 was the move-in date. The completion of the building was really 52.
I want to outline just.
I lived here 50 years, but not at its start.
What I find so fascinating about Gil is not only his psychological intelligence, which is very pointed and very sharp, okay, but also his political acumen. And he combines these two fields, politics and psychology, and also throw in activism, and you got Gil, and he's also a very social person. So we're trying to promote social life on our show and get people talking together. Gil is also quite a character in Greenwich Village, and he sort of harkens back to the golden age of Greenwich Village, when you had interesting people like Gil. Now, of course, it becomes more homogenous as the rents go up, and you get a different...
Edith Windsor in this building, for example. She recently died.
Who was Edith Windsor?
Edith Windsor ushered in same-sex marriage. She was told by the IRS when her psychologist wife, they were married in Canada, Thea Spear, died. She was told, you have to pay as a single woman. She said, no, I'm married. And they said, no, marriage is a man and a woman. You're not. You have a woman. In fact, you have another woman, one too many, but no, you pay as a single. She said, that's unlawful. They said, take it to the Supreme Court, lady. She did. She won. Kennedy voted in her favor, and that invalidated the Domestic Marriage Act, DOMA, which said marriage had to be a man and a woman. That was invalidated by Windsor, the United States versus Windsor. And the next year came that there had to be same-sex marriage. But in her case, it opened that door, which then provided the fifth vote in the next case, Oglethorpe, where everybody could be same-sex marriage everywhere in the country. But Windsor was the first.
Now, I've seen Gil in action at political...
Larry Kramer lives in this building.
Talk about Larry Kramer.
Larry Kramer is a very well-known gay activist who started ACT UP. Wrote a Tony Award-winning play, The Normal Heart, which had a rerun a couple of years ago on Broadway. Also, we had Ed Koch in this building. We had Bella Abzug in this building.
Abzug was here?
Yeah, down to her death. I knew her well. She, expressed herself very loudly in the lobby at times, like when her daughter lost for city council to Tom Duane. She was shouting in the lobbies, male bonding, and she was stamping her foot, shouting, male bonding. That's what did it, male bonding.
She went to high school with my grandmother at Walton High School in the Bronx.
I didn't have the joy of going to high school, so that's for me an unknown. I didn't attend high school, but I did attend middle school, where I was put with slow-learning children, and then college with very bright children, where they seemed to understand that I was brighter than many of the even college students, but In school, they did not. You're part of that school system, the New York City schools. You went there.
Was, but I was a rebel teacher. I was an outsider, yeah.
As was I. In fact, when I taught at Hofstra, I was quoted in the Daily News. They ran an article about Mr. Novak. Do you remember the TV program Mr. Novak? Are you old enough to remember that, with James Franciscus, a high school teacher? Okay, well, there was one in the 60s. Oh, you were too young then. You were like maybe not born or four.
I was born in 1963.
Okay, in 63, I wrote a letter in the Daily News stating that, because the students at Bayside High School said, there's no nice teachers like that. You were a nice teacher, right?
Well, I try to be, you know.
They said, there's no nice teachers like that. He's not real. Teachers are mean and nasty, and, you know, who's he kidding? And I wrote saying that students at Bayside High School have known very few teachers in their lives. I have known many more as a professor of education at Hofstra University and a high school psychologist in it was an upscale school on Long Island, the Merrick Central High School District at W.C. Meffam High School. I was their psychologist in a fancy upscale Long Island high school. And I said in the letter, Mr. Novak is real. I have known many Mr. Novaks. I was a Mr. Novak, and I signed it, you know, Gil Horowitz, ID, professor of education at Hofstra University, and psychologist, W.C. Meffam High School, Belmore, New York. And they published my letter. That was the first time I got into the media, and I discovered that I was a Tim James, Liz Solenberger's husband. Do you remember Tim James from the VRDC? Says, oh, Gil, you're a media whore. And, you know, okay. Every time my picture appears in the Times, the News, the Post, some story about me on TV, I don't know why I like it. I do like it.
You know, sometimes when you go to political meetings and it's very boring and people are droning on, that's when you hope that Gil will walk into the room.
Say something meaningful and brief.
And entertaining in its own way. You're very interesting.
Entertaining. Not always, but sometimes entertaining. Well, you know, I taught middle school and high school. Yes. And I knew that if you didn't keep them entertained and awake, they weren't going to like you, because you would be boring them. And I liked them. And, you know, I was myself 20 years old, 21 years old when I taught middle school and high school. So I wanted to please them, to be the teacher that I would have wanted that I never had. I didn't go to high school. I hated my teachers in every grade. So I wanted to be the good guy. And somehow I was.
This brings up a theory that I have about Donald Trump, okay, which is regardless of whether you like his policies or not, okay?
Which I do not. Okay. Which I do not.
Well, I just want to talk about him as kind of an entertainer in chief.
Very entertaining.
Yeah.
Very
but
entertaining.
people were so bored of politics. Politicians had become so droning and boring that they love this guy.
You know, I have another theory on that one, the something else theory. Yeah. It wasn't that they weren't being entertained. I know you come from an entertainment angle of life. You do a one-man show at a community center. You would like to be on Broadway. Me, no, actually. Put me in the Times, the News, the Post, every television channel, I'm good. U.S. News and World Report. I've been on all of them. Bloomberg News, I've been on all of them, quoted or my picture or a story about me. And I love it. But it wasn't entertainment, I believe. It was, this is not working. Let's try something, anything else. And Donald Trump was column 2, anything else. Nutty, but he was clearly different than everything else. It was no Me Too on that deal. There were all the others, the Republicans who were like the Democrat. They were all middle huggers trying to find the center. They all were shooting for the center. And Donald, one day he'd be out there to the left, one day he'd be on the moon. But clearly he was something else. And they said, you know, all these others, they say everything, they promise you the moon, the sun, it's all good, but it's never any good. They stink. Let's try something. Like they tried Jesse Ventura in Minnesota. They said, you know, these people are not working. Let's try a wrestler. As odd as it seemed, they were willing to try anything. So I think that's what they did. They were willing, that they were so disgusted, especially Hillary was such a terrible candidate. such a weak candidate. The Democrats picked and sabotaged Bernie's campaign. His own party sabotaged his campaign. He could have won. He could have beat Mr. Donald. He could beat him now if there was a rerun of Bernie versus Donald J. Trump. They'd be around the same age still. He could beat him now. People believe that, first of all, he's really not a socialist, he's a reformer, as has been pointed out in our PALM meetings. But that's what you could sell in America, a good reformer, and that may be just what we need, a good reformer.
Not a performer, a reformer.
Reformer, not a performer. Okay. And although he tries to find the middle for his Vermont base, once the president, he would let loose, and he would be one whale of a good president.
I find Bernie very engaging also, and very interesting to watch, because he's trying to tell the truth.
Well, nobody but God always tells the truth. Only the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are truthful. Everybody else is. I have pencils that from Albert Ellis Institute that say, which I brought with me. Albert Ellis Institute. I am a fallible human being.
I am a fallible human being. We are all fallible.
We're all fallible. And that was a key in Albert Ellis's thinking. Don't should on yourself.
No shoulding. No shoulding.
On yourself. I should have been better. No, the opposite. I'm a fallible. I made a mistake.
Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect. It's okay. So I was taught not alone to be forgiving. As a Christian, I've been taught that. But number one, by Dr. Ellis, to forgive yourself.
Wow.
Don't hold yourself up to some unreasonable standard. I'm a fallible human being, so I made a mistake. I'll try better the next time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Also, I'm just reading a book by Deepak Chopra, where he talks about the importance of uncertainty. Not to always be dogmatic.
Thinkers like Deepak Chopra, because they're so abstract that you could see like a Rorschach card, you could see anything into it that you choose to see. It gives you your own imprint on it, whereas Albert Ellis is very precise and constraining, like a mathematical formula. You wouldn't like it. You wouldn't be a math teacher because you would feel boxed in by the numbers.
Well, let's care about our audience right now who's watching us, who may not know who Albert Ellis is. And let's see if we can give them...
In psychology today, he is considered the most influential thinker of the 20th century in psychology and psychotherapy. And they said, Psychology Today, even more influential than Freud himself.
Wait a minute. Freud. Here's Freud. Here we go. Wait, can we hold up the Freud versus Ellis here?
Okay, we are here. Now, I hate to take advantage of you in this way because you have such a weak candidate and mine is so superior. But, you know, as you chose the match, I'm happy to bring out Dr. Ellis versus that neurologist. He was not, by the way, a psychologist or a psychiatrist. He's a neurologist and very weakly trained in the 1800s because they didn't know much neurology.
Well, let me just, Gil, if I may, Bill, Gil, I have the microphone right now, but Gil, I know, but let's just, okay. All right, but I wanted to say about Freud, okay, that he was the first person to really say, let's have a conversation with people who are not feeling well psychologically.
That's not true. I believe that Aunt Sadie, he probably was Jewish, probably he had an Aunt Sadie or an Aunt Bertha. They were the first people that said that. He was doing, in his medical office, what had been done by old aunts, Bubba's old aunts, from time immemorial. He was not the first person he may have been the first medical doctor to say, doing this, I can show, which he never could or did, will have therapeutic benefits. He was the first one to bring science into the deal, and he had all kinds of pseudoscience. He had a picture of the brain that he ill understood, because no one understood the brain in the 1800s. It was basically unknown. He has a picture of the brain, and then he tries to suggest that the anatomy of the brain proves his psychoanalytic theories. He's a very bad theorist.
Didn't Freud?
I myself I was a research psychologist for our Million Children school school system, one of two in the chancellor's office. I understand theory and what makes a theory. As theory goes, psychoanalytic theory is just not a scientific theory. It's like alchemy.
But
It has elements of science, but it's not science.
Didn't Freud himself once say that he himself was not a Freudian, and he began to critique some of his earlier positions?
Changing his positions.
But he paved the way for...
When he was doing cocaine, he had all kinds of interesting ideas when he was snorting cocaine during that period, when he felt he had found the wonder drug. Are you familiar with that?
No.
No. You might read about it. It's there in the archives. Not often talked about by Freudians, but he went through a period in which he was a regular cocaine user. I would say addict, but I know from his own writings, regular cocaine user, and he thought that he had found the wonder drug. And it does produce a euphoria, and it can seem to the discoverer like, you have hit the mother lode. Unfortunately, its side effects are so horrendous that it cannot be used therapeutically. But he found out from trial and error that it was not a good idea. Took him a couple of years.
Let's get beyond the Freud versus, Ellis debate, and I'm not...
Trained in Freudian psychology.
And I'm not here to... If I could bring you together with a Freudian in the future, and you could have that debate, but I don't want to have that right now. Okay, I want to use our precious moments of time to find out more about you, Gil, and to share your biography and who you are and your thoughts with the audience. And so you really have a passion for Albert Ellis. Maybe you could explain why? What was...
Sure.
Yeah.
He saved my life, number one. Now, I was trained as a psychologist, and my training as a psychologist, I would say, is strong. I started out... I failed kindergarten, as I mentioned. First, second grade, they didn't love me. By the fifth grade, they were again failing me. But my father and the principal had a discussion, and then I was re-examined in the teacher's home the day after school ended, and they decided somehow I had passed the fifth grade. Sixth grade was uneventful. Then seventh, eighth, and ninth, they put me with very slow-learning children, the sweat hogs. And I
Welcome back, Carter. You were the...
shop.
Okay.
To this day, I'm good at electrical wiring, carpentry, sanding, metalwork, because I had for 7, 8, and 9, 3 years when they were getting algebra and foreign language, the real kids, we got shop.
And you're from Brooklyn.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you mentioned the sweat hog, so yeah.
And then, after my mother died when I was 14, I stopped going to school. I went to high school, forget it, who cared? Yeah. I drew the lucky number. God works in I do believe in God. I'm a baptized Catholic, and God meant for me to go on to be an educator. A psychologist. We do good things, psychologists. Became a supervisor psychologist, and then the deputy superintendent in charge of pupil personnel services, in charge of guidance counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, you name it, Dr. Morris Krugman. And he had this idea, there are kids that we're missing, we're losing. And he put me as part of an experimental group. And they were told, do whatever it takes to make your group succeed. Break the rules, do whatever. They altered my grades, they forged my grades, and it says I have a high school diploma. My 40s were changed to 90s, and off I was sent to Brooklyn College. And by age 20, I was teaching middle school. By age 21, I was teaching at Erasmus High School. And I went on beyond my wildest dreams. A punk kid from Brooklyn who failed kindergarten, didn't go to high school. I don't even have a GED. I just have a piece of paper that claims it's a high school diploma.
So you went to the famous Erasmus High School. You taught there.
I taught there.
Well, Barbra Streisand, was she your student?
She could have been. Nobody knew her at the time. She had been in one performance right here in this neighborhood of the Bonsoir on 8th Street near McDougal. Maybe on 8th Street they knew her, but at Erasmus we knew Bobby Fischer. He was famous, the chess player, because he had gone to our school for 4 days, and it would have been his school if he ever came to the U.S. He was traveling around the world. We all said, oh, we have Bobby Fischer. Barbra Streisand could have been, I had Barbara Schwartz, Barbara Rappaport, Barbara Goldberg, and maybe Barbra Streisand I wouldn't have known. She wasn't that good a student from what I've read. So I wouldn't have been giving her high grades. She would have been another Jewish Barbara, of which there were many.
Now, you and I, our biographies intersected in a very interesting way, because I did my student teaching at a place called City as School, and you were the first psychologist there?
Yes. I've been in many places. I started as a middle school teacher, a high school teacher, college professor. I taught at City College, Hunter College, City University College Center in Manhattan, a professor at NYU, assistant professor at NYU on the faculty of Columbia University. And other things I did, I was a hospital psychologist and a school psychologist. And I was the very first school psychologist for a school when it came to Manhattan that John Braden was a student teacher at.
A student teacher, yeah, in 1997. Yeah.
Okay, see, I was there in the 70s as their first ever school psychologist. I also was a school psychologist for LaGuardia, the High School of Performing Arts at Lincoln Center, Music and Art and Performing Arts. So I've been around the block. If it's in New York City, I've probably done something, probably taught there, like Hunter City, NYU, Columbia. You mentioned that I've been either on their faculty or a professor there, or in the hospitals department or in the school system. I was one of two research scientists. This dumb kid, who they said was dumb, they really did say I was dumb, was one of two research psychologists for the entire million children in the office of the chancellor. There were only two of us. I did research still noted to this day. The first experiments in artificial intelligence for teaching, I did as the research psychologist together with NYU as my co-author on a talking computer that taught thousands of our children daily.
So what would be your criticism of our public education system today? It does not work. Okay. Why? Why?
Well, in a nutshell, I'm a member of the UFT. It is better than it was before we had a union, but it provides an inflexibility in the system that, for example, the Catholic schools or the charter schools have high flexibility. And even in Nassau County, where I was a high school psychologist, if you're not good enough, you don't stay. Whereas in New York City, it's like policemen and firemen, and some of them are good, and a lot of them are not so good. It's a civil service job. They don't get the brightest and the finest anymore. It used to be that we got a lot of really fine women in the schools teaching, because in the 30s and 40s, women didn't have other career paths. They could either be a teacher, a nurse, or a social worker. Those were the career paths that were really open to women. And so many of them became teachers who are now medical doctors, lawyers, business women. They would say, teacher, are you kidding? What am I going to earn there? So the brightest and the finest are no longer going into teaching women. That free labor pool that we had of cheap labor that provided decent education because they were bright. Now the school teachers are, I would say, modest intelligence in New York City. And those that don't feel like teaching, you can never get rid of them, almost never. It would, be a lucky day for a principal if he could get rid of his worst teachers. And there's no accountability for the principals either. It's just like a civil service job. That's why we have so many marginal policemen, because they could get away with so much, and they investigate themselves. Civilian Complaint Review Board is all internal. And once in a while, someone will sue saying tenure is no good. Well, that's not a good solution, because if you take tenure away, you take free speech away. Tenure was originally part of our constitutional right to. Teachers should have the right to speak freely and not be afraid they'll get fired because someone in the Board of Education was a Republican or someone was a Democrat and they're a Republican, to speak what you believe to be true. So you can't take tenure away. So it's not an easy solution. Money would help, and technology. A lot of technology would help. We're in the dark ages in education. If we brought in what IBM knows how to do or corporations know how to do, would they ever tolerate the cost-to-learning ratio? If this were a corporation, they would bring in experts and say, no, get rid of those people you're now calling so-called teachers, and we're going to have information experts that are going to, at half the cost, and we're going to now automate about 80% of what's being done, and we're going to bring in some high-cost school psychologists and school social workers, because when the kids have problems, they need real help, and those teachers are not it. So I would personnel the schools and change the whole what it is, what's a classroom and a school, that could work. What we're doing now, it doesn't work. Our children are being cheated in New York City. They say, oh, well, they're black and Puerto Rican, they come from bad homes. The task is to educate them. If the teachers can't do it, bring in someone else who can.
Okay, I want to educate. Okay, that's one thing.
And a lot of money they're being paid.
Yeah. Well, we're not here to solve the whole education crisis in this
So I gave it.
hour of us being together. I'm interested in how can you and I have an engaging dialogue right now.
We are. In my opinion, we are. I'm highly engaged. You don't feel engaged?
Well, I felt a little disengaged when you were talking on and on about the education system. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't following.
Right? I know things about education that rare you will ever find in a room. One person who has been around the block in education so many places as I have been. So.
But my mind, I just want to tell you, because our audience is watching, and maybe their minds wandered. My mind wandered. Maybe not. Maybe
Theirs didn't. We don't know. We could take a poll of them later. See, I'm a research psychologist.
Email. Wait a minute. Hold it.
I want to theorize what you think
of our audience to email Public Voice Salon, info@Public Voice Salon, and tell us if your mind wandered or not while Gil gave his discourse.
I think Mr. Braden is right, or Dr. Horowitz. That's what it comes down to.
And let's get over the whole rightness and wrongness, because I love you, Gil. Let's just get that out of the way.
Would I be here with you if I didn't love you? I was saying for years no, but I thought, hey, John, his charming wife Claudia, the library.
Yeah, and I hope this is a beginning. I hope this deepens our friendship. I hope you don't get angry.
Absolutely. I've confronted some of the things in your personality that I thought you might want to be familiar with.
Okay, let's get over. Let's talk about your confrontational nature. I want to be honest here. Wait, Claudia has a question?
No,
Yes?
Gil has a key. What
Oh.
it means.
Oh, the key.
What is the
magic key?
Okay.
This key can let you out of the state mental institution. It did. When I was a senior clinical psychologist for a state psychiatric hospital on Long Island, this key was given to me because that's what reminded me what was different about me from the patients.
Okay.
They didn't have this key, this magic key to let them out of the mental hospital for lunch, to go home.
It's like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
You know, are you familiar with the book? You like books, The Snake Pit?
No.
No. Albert Ellis believed in homework. I'm going to give you homework. You're a literateur. Read the book, The Snake Pit.
Okay.
It is about life in a psychiatric hospital. They existed. They were real. I was a psychologist for one. Worse than One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Worse. More horrendous. Someone asked me if I had stress in my work, and I said, well, as a professor, really none. As a school psychologist, once every year, some suicidal child might be sent to me. That was a little stressful, how to handle that in a intelligent way, which wasn't too bad for the child and still met the requirements of professionalism and the school. And I look good in the deal was a requirement. That was stressful. You couldn't make a mistake on that one because no one would ever believe you after that. If you said child's fine, send the child back to class, and the next day child is dead, who's going to trust anything you say? And the hospitals, because there you had people that were truly mentally ill and a mentally ill approach to treating them. You mentioned another novel, one film also, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that talks about the horrors of psychiatric institutions. It was true. It was true.
Didn't Geraldo Rivera do a good thing for that? Didn't he do a good thing for that?
He was a minor player in the deal. There were activists, patients' rights groups. Finally, a society realized that they all had to be closed, and they were all closed down one by one. Kings Park, or the three on Long Island, that housed thousands and thousands, warehoused thousands and thousands of patients daily. around the clock. For years, they were institutionalized like a prison with indeterminate sentences. Kings Park, I was a senior clinical psychologist there. This is the Magic Key. Central Islip and Pilgrim State, 3 of them, all sister hospitals.
What's the connection, Gil, between...
Mentally ill in a mentally ill way. It was mentally ill conceived treatment for the mentally ill. They were seen as evil. They were not evil, they were medically impaired.
Is there a connection between society and mental health? We had a guest on our show, Harriet Fraud, who is a psychotherapist and an activist based in Manhattan, and her work looks at the connection between politics and mental health. And she says, for example, that in America, we have 5% of the world's population, but we consume 66% of the mental health medications of this,
That doesn't necessarily mean that we're overprescribing.
What's going on? What's...
I'm a research psychologist. She is not. She's a clinician. Okay. It might mean that our patients are getting more appropriate and better treatment as available because it is affordable, because we did... In every category, our patients use more drugs. I mean, you might argue for naturalistic medicine, in which very few drugs are used. I wouldn't. I'm 81 years old. Wherever possible, I take the vitamin or the herb or the exercise or the physical therapy or the psychotherapy. That's the natural one. But if my medical doctor and I do the research and he's right or she's right, and there is no alternative for what I've got, like a thyroid condition I have, or this or that, or a stent in my heart, I'm going to go with the drug, because that's what keeping me, most people my age are dead, by the way, statistically. The average age for American male living is 78. I'm 81. I'm already beyond my date stamp.
So you have a sense of agency. You have a sense of activity. You know who you are. You get up in the morning. You have projects.
I do not know who I am. If I knew who I were, I would not currently be seeing 4 psychologists.
Do you know who I am?
I know who you are.
Can you tell me? Because I'm not so sure.
You fully know who you are, John Bray.
Can we talk about this?
We could talk about it.
You going to charge me?
No, nothing. All free.
Oh, this is beautiful.
Okay.
That's the payback
I
for...
was pointing out to you earlier that if you felt secure in who you are, you would have no need, and I share this with you, I tend to, see, you go one step further than I, you tend to exaggerate who you are, so you will talk about,
Is that true, Claudia?
Yes.
She said yes.
There you go, your own wife. But you're protected. She's not allowed to testify against you. A wife is not, you could say, I object. My own wife is not allowed to bear witness against me. So,
But I'm not like Trump. I'm not like narcissistic like that.
no, neither of us could reach that level. The only one who I would say is a friend of yours whose last name rhymes with rat.
Wait a minute. Jim Forat is a beautiful man. I love Jim Forat. Don't say anything bad about
I don't
Jim.
want to get sued by anybody.
I thought you guys were liked each other, or you were frenemies, maybe. Frenemies.
I was a Stonewall rioter. I didn't want to bring this up. I was arrested at the Stonewall riots, and for anybody to fraudulently claim they were there and then misrepresent what happened, what I saw with my own eyes, what David Carter, a historian, what Dr. Martin Duberman, a professor of history at City College, happens to be LGBTQ, also saw and wrote about. Historians wrote about. I saw with my own eyes. I was arrested. I have a criminal arrest record showing that I was at the Stone. The man has nothing. He just made it up because it makes him feel important. I think that's offensive.
Well, I'm going to play psychologist with you now, if I may, Gil, okay? Because Jim Forat, okay, who's also an activist based in Greenwich Village, and he's a character, he's interesting, he's engaging. You and him in some way...
State Assembly against Glick.
Yes, and I see you kind of both as cut from the same cloth in some way, okay?
No way.
But wait.
That's why I find how you link me and him. Even you're not as narcissistic as he is. You're more in my league of narcissism. He's as narcissistic as Donald Trump. He's in acting, he's called a mugger. He gets into a scene he has nothing to do with and somehow makes himself the most important part of that scene.
He says things
He shoves his way into, and he does this because he feels so unimportant that he has to say, I'm here, I'm going to keep talking even though you told me my time was up. Don't you whippersnapper, don't you be respectful to an old man. He'll
Jim?
do every trick in the book, every stage trick, every psychological con, if you will.
We have a problem here on the left, okay? Because on the political left, there's a lot of fragmentation, and there are people who are working in similar fields, but, they're fighting injustice, they're fighting for equality, and all this great stuff, but they find minor things, they find minor things that they're wrong, that they don't like about the other, personality differences, and then they hate each other.
Let's unite up around our causes. His cause is not LGBTQ rights. He said at the Landmarks Preservation Commission, where I was on every TV channel, on every radio station, none for him, by the way, because they don't believe him. They don't believe he was there. He said, I gave up my acting career in order to advance gay rights. Who would believe that? He got every job he could get. The only problem he had is he's not very good as an actor. Nobody wanted him. But he took every gig he could get. But he goes up and says, I gave up my career in order to do this.
Are you upset that I brought up...
That is his career, advancing his own name.
Gil, are you upset right now?
He's gone on TV claiming that he was at the Stonewall riots.
Okay, I'm putting my psychologist hat on again, okay? And I'm going to analyze you. I'm going to analyze you right now.
What program was he on?
Gil, please, could I speak?
Stephen Colbert.
Gil, I know. So,
Colbert on television.
but wait a minute.
He was a Stonewall
Do you feel angry that he's gotten more recognition?
I'm in the Times. I'm on every radio program, television station in the New York area. I'm quoted around the country and in Great Britain.
Jim was on Charlie Rose and he was on Colbert.
And you compare that, do you have a smartphone?
Not on me now.
I'll lend you mine.
I don't have a
I'll lend you
smartphone.
mine.
I don't want a smartphone, by the way. I'm against
Gil
smartphones.
Horowitz, Stonewall, and James Farrat, Stonewall, and see what you come up with. I am recognized, not he.
But you both are doing wonderful work, and I think I care.
Himself, I accidentally did wonderful work for my community by accident. I happened to be there. It's not like I'm a better person than he is. I really was there. What distinguishes him and me is that I actually was there. He is a liar.
Let's change the subject.
How can good come from it?
Let's change the subject to something that might bring us together. Trump. Let's change the subject to Trump.
We're agreed on.
I want to just say one thing about Trump, okay? Because in terms of psychology, all right, I want to know what your profession, the psychologists of America, what has been their take on Trump? And do you think that they were irresponsible for not making his deficiencies more aware to a broader public before the election? Now you see them out speaking out and saying he's got problems and this and that, but before the election they were quiet.
Everybody's saying psychologists are not coming out in droves as psychologists and saying that. A lot of what you read is what I would call folk psychology. Everybody's aunt is a folk psychologist. Everybody's bubba or grandmother, the Yiddish term for grandmother, is a folk psychologist. But actual psychologists have not, in any numbers, and should not enter into politics. It is not our role to either aid the Bush administration, as the American Psychological Association did with torture. We were consultants on how to more effectively torture, extract information from the terrorists. We should not have done that, and we have apologized publicly for having done that. So too, we should not use our clinical talent to enter into politics. I, as a voter, am allowed to say that I think that man is an antisocial personality disorder. That I happen to be a psychologist, and I know this voter knows the term for what he is. I might be served with papers tomorrow from Mr. Trump's lawyers, but after they see this someday on Salon, but But I'm not saying that as a psychologist. I'm saying that as a voter who happened to have read a psychology book or two, and the closest diagnosis would be antisocial personality disorder, as revealed by not his a policy of being untruthful so often.
Is it dangerous for him to be the president with his finger on the nuclear button, having access to the nuclear codes? Is that a danger for humanity?
Danger to American democracy. I taught the Constitution. When I was 21 years old, I taught high school in New York City, my first professional, if you will, job. And I taught the Constitution, and he is the biggest challenge to the Constitution in all of history, in my opinion. I would say that I am a proud part of the resistance. Yes, you can photograph my door. Yes. I am a proud part of the resistance. The difference in a free society and underground France, where if you got caught in the resistance, you were killed by the Nazis, our wonderful system allows for an active resistance that, unlike Father Niemeyer in Germany, who, when it was too late, said, and then they came for me, but it was too late. It is never too late in America, and I have a button that says free press. That is our secret weapon, the free press. The New York Times and CNN to shine the light. Felix Frankfurter said that the cure for the evils of politics were the spotlight. The spotlight was the disinfectant to shine the light of truth. And I believe, just as in Alabama, where in so many decades they couldn't remember when a Democrat was elected, but the light came on, and enough Republicans said, I'm going to write in that other Republican guy. That, by the way, those write-ins were the margin of victory. Or former President Obama getting on the telephone and making robocalls to many of his fellow African Americans, saying, you cannot sit this one out. This one is too important. Personal, just as they were getting robocalls from Trump, they were getting robocalls from someone they listened to, just as the Obama space now listened to him. And I think come the midterms, we're going to have a better Congress. I don't know if it'll be in the Senate or not, but I think there's going to be movement in the House and a different tone in government in the second 2 years, which will, I predict, be the gentleman's final 2 years. He will not, in my opinion, be impeached. He'll hang on through the 4 years and do as much damage to American democracy as he can, but he will be defeated and reversed. Because just as those executive orders, when he came in, were taken away, his will be stripped back when a sane president.
Gil, I'm feeling angry right now. I'm feeling a little angry. I'm feeling a little left out right now. I'm just telling you, I'm feeling a little left out, and because I need a hug. I need a hug.
All right, Claudia, would you like to come over there?
Claudia, come, Claudia. I get a hug later. I'll get a hug later. I know I get a hug. But I wanted to just, because I might not have told you this, so it's my fault. Okay, that our show is not really an interview show. It's more of a dialogue. So there's a democracy that's implicit, that we each have like equal rights. No. It's just that like
men tend to snap into each other's conversation at will. Females take turns. There's research on that. Whereas men, executive males, they'll Rex Tillerson, when Donald said something he didn't agree with, said, "You're a bleeping moron." And it wasn't the way he used the real effing word, not bleeping. He just cut right into it, because Donald was probably saying, "Let's bomb North Korea," or whatever. And it was quoted that day that Rex Tillerson, right in the middle of that sentence, said, "What are you saying? You're a blank moron." So cut right into me.
I'm not good at that, Gil. I'm not good at that. I like there to be more of a rhythm, more of a back and forth. And so I just want to put a request in for our next conversation, whether it's on the air or off the air. I just would like to be heard a little bit more, okay, by you.
As a therapist, is be more assertive and make your way into the dialogue, because I'm very dominating. And I was a high school teacher, and I see the world through the lens of a high school teacher.
What, are we out of time? Say, okay, Gil, hold it now. Wait, please. Let me just say something, okay? And because you mentioned your button, okay? And I want to share. I would like to share my button. I'm wearing a button. And this is not like Trump and Kim Jong-un's whose button is bigger, because both of our buttons are good, okay? Look, I want to show you. My button says, wait a minute.
We put this on
Can I just say, well, look, we can show your button later, but this is my button. It says peace, love, and books. Peace, love, and books. And I got this from the Strand bookstore. And this ties in with you, okay, because number one, I love you, okay? But number two, I think we both care about peace, okay? And you are a very erudite man. You are.
The dove at the window, didn't you? The stained glass dove at the window overlooking Washington Square.
You just showed me your apartment for the first time, and I want you to show Claudia too. It's a very interesting apartment.
Same 60 seconds you got.
Only 60 seconds?
How long were you there?
What was it like when Bella Abzug, when you ran into her in the elevators and stuff?
Well, the morning after her daughter lost for city council to Tom Duane, she was stamping her feet in the lobby, shouting, male bonding, that's what did it, male bonding. She was an angry woman. Let me get back to activism.
Okay, yes.
I am now part of the active planning committee of the Progressive Action Lower Manhattan chapter of NYPAN, New York Progressive Action, the Bernie Sanders-inspired network around the country of more than 30 groups that are all connected to each other. New York State has an active chapter. Arthur Schwartz is the treasurer of the New York State group, and also the Democratic Village male leader.
Yes.
Some may remember that I, for some reason, got it into my head that I might want to run against Arthur and announce my candidacy. This was not a good idea. Arthur is really good at what he does. He's a lawyer. I'm a psychologist. I'll pick a lawyer in this deal. Great as a psychologist I am, we need more a lawyer to do the things like suing Beth Israel, for example. Street actions are part of our group. I love this because I was a Stonewall rioter. And I like to get right down into getting political relief from activism, true activism. It might be, I was one of the 24 organizers of the Matthew Shepard demonstration, an illegal march through mid-Manhattan that tied up mid-Manhattan traffic for hours. After the death of Matthew Shepard, we wanted to express our rage, and we did. Many of us were arrested and trampled with horses, but we expressed ourselves. Sometimes you take to the streets, as ACT UP does. Sometimes you use lobbying.
The Women's March of 2017. The Women's March.
The Women's March. Yeah. Well, Stonewall is likened by President Obama to only two other events in American history, Seneca Falls and Selma, the Selma March for African Americans, Seneca, and then he said from Seneca Falls to Selma to Stonewall. He likens that watershed moment for my LGBT community. As I said before, various commissions, I am the B in LGBTQ, a bisexual male.
Oh, yes. So you swing both ways.
Well, I would not put it that way, because that's a very negative, I might point out, my friend John, a very negative way to swing both ways. You know, we're talking about human existence, and to vulgarize it, I would say, down to, well, do you swing this way, or do you swing both ways? It's like a door, you know, it could go this way or that way. We're talking about a very complex set of, to this psychologist, social, psychological, emotional, sexual, developmental issues.
What did Albert Ellis advise you in this?
Find a woman and get married.
When was this? When did he say this?
Around 1999. He said, Gil, you've had girlfriends, you've had good sexual experience with women. He said, you've tried everything in sex pretty much, but as a practical matter, and he put it more or less He didn't use his exact words. Why don't you want to go mainstream as opposed to special ed? If you're special ed, that's okay. That's what you can do. Be in special ed, you'll learn something. But if you're also capable of studying in the mainstream, I would recommend, you go get a PhD or a PsyD and go in mainstream, become part of the majority society.
Was Albert Ellis tough with you? Because he was very tough. He practiced tough love.
He loved me.
But was he tough with you, though?
No, never.
Never cursed at you?
No, never. It was interesting.
He used to curse at people,
He regarded me as a friend and often his psychologist. What makes you his psychologist? He told me things you would only tell a psychologist.
So you were more like colleagues with Albert Ellis.
No, beyond that, he had what analysts would call countertransference to me. He had an emotional input back into me. He would tell me about his earliest memories, his father, his mother. He talked mostly about his mother. He was obsessed with his mother in some ways. He said families are all crazy. He did not like his mother or his family. He said all families are crazy. Well, I disagreed with him on that one because without families, we don't have a stable society. So I saw families as good but not good enough, as they could be better, but very necessary. And to call them all crazy, I thought was overkill, I thought. Also,
You disagreed with Ellis on that point.
three things. Also, he said in writing, that his cognitive behavior therapy, which he called by various names over the years, the last term he chose to associate his therapy with is cognitive affective behavior therapy. Near his death, he said he should have called it cognitive affective behavior therapy, CABT. That would have more clearly expressed what he meant by his brand of therapy. He said that it could be used with schizophrenics and other psychotics. Most psychologists do not believe that it is applicable to psychotics, only to those that are not psychotic. Rational therapy, because psychotics are not rational. So they're not going to be able to do rational therapy. Also, he believed that homosexuality was a disorder. I'm not going to use the word disease. It was a not good kind of thing to have, but it could be, and he used the word cured. Cured, it could be cured. So implicit, if you're curing something, is that it's a disease. Implicit is. And he has a book called The Causes and Cure of Homosexuality. And he cites case studies in the book. And I read them carefully. And I asked him, Dr. Ellis, you used to write about the causes and cure of homosexuality. Have you changed your mind on that? He said, no, Gil. I said, well, you don't say anything anymore. He said, Gil, I'm a very prominent psychologist. I'm known throughout the world. Do I want the gays picketing my office 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? I have to be quiet. They're not going to like this. I'm not going to say that clearly it's not a disease. Clearly, same-sex attraction is not a disease. Is it less because of the social burdens that it requires to be involved in a minority activity where the majority of the world is you're living as a left-handed person in a right-handed world? Or to use an even crueler analogy, a blind person in a sighted world, where you really, many gay people, the majority of gays, do not know what heterosexual love is about. I happen to know because oddly, for God's own reasons, I could do either or. Rare, I suspect, but we don't have good data on that.
And we don't have time. We only got about 5 minutes left, Claudia, dear. So time is precious.
It's a disease. I do not believe it's a disease.
Yeah.
But if you have the choice, I think he's right. I should find a wife. If anybody looking thinks I'm good-looking, intelligent, and would be a good husband, woman, it could be many ages, but under 80, anywhere under 80. Gil at if you just right, from Gil, FROMGIL, at hotmail.com. I'll answer you.
Or on a warm spring day, you can go to Washington Square Park, where we often encounter Gil, okay, strolling in the park. We only have 5 minutes left, less than 5 minutes. So let's,
As one of the organizers of the Washington Square Music Festival, now in our, we're about to do our 60th season this year. We've been doing free concerts in Washington Square Park for the last 60 years, high-quality music. That you would have to go to a Carnegie Hall to hear. Okay. We give free.
Great. Let's have no more long discourses right now.
Sure.
Let's just be together, you and I, in a dialogue. But I'm very interested now.
I don't accept you as a resident of Hoboken, by the way. I never heard the answer from Arthur.
Does Arthur accept me as a resident of Hoboken? Yes, he says it's okay because we're active in New York. We're active in the city with our TV show. Our TV show airs in New York, so.
Give, or did either?
Well, we're not. We don't like to join. Our focus is our show. But here, we just
hoping for your vote on like when we endorsed Margaret Chin.
Well, we don't get into that. But here, look. What makes Gil Gil? I want to know, number one, and I want to know, number two.
Gil can only be Gil. Gil does not know who he is.
Okay.
I read a very exciting book about a 5-year-old about play therapy by a psychologist, the author of an expert on play therapy, Virginia Axline. Dr. Axline worked with this 5-year-old called Dibbs, D-I-B-B-S, is either his made-up name or his real name, and it's called Dibbs in Search of Self. Now, I've been searching for myself all of my life, and as yet, as we sit here now, and you said, well, you know who you are, the answer to that is, yes. We're going to be honest with each other. No, John, I'm seeing 4 psychologists currently in order to try to figure out the answer to that one. Yes. God bless psychologists. We're very good at what we do.
Wonderful profession.
Very helpful.
And I like to say, I am who I am not yet. I am who I am not yet. How do you feel about me right now? How do you feel about this interview? And how do you feel about what's happened in the past hour?
I think I have some more psychotherapy to do with you to make you feel less needy of feeling you feel left out of the conversation. You conceded. You were not good at working your way into it. I said, well, just push your way right in. You said, well, I'm not good at that. So that confirms my idea that you feel inadequate, but you don't like that feeling. Someone told you weren't as good as you really are. You were an English teacher. You were a teacher in the Henry George School. You were a teacher in our high schools. You have a master's degree from that university. I was an assistant professor at NYU right out the door there. I was a student there in the 50s.
This is the real reason I had you on, so I could feel good about myself. I wanted free therapy, and I got it. But let's have lunch soon. Let's have lunch, and let's let it be more than 50 minutes, okay?
Now, what have you eaten at breakfast today so far?
Breakfast? Well, let's pick that up after the dialogue. We're saying good afternoon now to Mr. Dr. Gil Horowitz, Dr. Professor Gil, one of the most amazing, eccentric, interesting, brilliant man you'll ever meet. He's entertaining. He's important.
More brilliant people than I. Most of the professors at Columbia, where I was privileged to be on the faculty, were brighter and more interesting than I, but that they included me in a tiny part of their existence, or at Hunter College, or City College, or NYU.
We love you, Gil.
Me, Professor. Most of them
we're out of time.
Than I.
We love you, Gil, and we just want this to be part of an ongoing friendship and conversation. We care about you very much. And let's pick this up the next time.
We love each other, yes. But you need more psychotherapy.
Thank you. Okay. I love it. Okay. Thank you. That's good. Good end.